This man's name is Mike Webster. He was one of the best American football players of his time. He became an American football legend at his club called the Pittsburgh Steelers, namely a club that comes from the city of Pittsburgh Steelers. But now he has retired. At that time, he was receiving the biggest award in American football called the Hall of Fame Award. There he told a little about his experience when he was still active as a professional football player. He said that actually football was not as fun as everyone had imagined it to be. Because when he was still defending his club first, he often felt pain in his body due to the impact of his opponent's body. Before Mike closed his speech, he insists that the main job of a football player is to finish the game, no matter what happens. The club that manages to survive until the end of the game will be the winner. And this is Bennet Omalu. He is a forensic doctor who specializes in various medical sciences. He has 8 titles at once. There he was appointed to be a witness at a murder trial. He explained that he had expertise in the science of death. He researched about the reason a person could die. Dr. Ben explained if we could know how that person lived, then we will also know how that person died. He was seen trying to convince the judge that the suspect was not a murderer, even though he had a lot of blood on his hands, with all the theory of research results. So he concluded that the blood on the suspect's hands was not caused by killing the victim, but because he had helped the victim. Dr. Ben also explained to the judge if the suspect was sentenced to death, then the judge will kill innocent people. After that, he returned to his routine as a forensic doctor. When he arrived at the laboratory and performed an autopsy, turns out he has a strange habit. Every time he will start autopsy, he always talks to the corpse, and he said, "Please help me to find out what caused your death." He also always listens to music during autopsy. Because of his strange method, Dr. Ben is often reprimanded by the head of the laboratory named Dr. Cyril, because the doctors there complain when they see how Dr. Ben works. Dr. Cyril then advised him to find a lover because so far he was only busy in his research. On the other hand, Mike Webster seems to have fallen into poverty. He had abandoned his family. In fact, he also sells his award trophies just to fulfill his daily needs. There, his former teammate, Justin, came to see Mike to talk about their illness. Mike said that the pain in his head was very severe. He felt he couldn't take it anymore. He even inhaled glue to get drunk just to ease the pain in his head. Meanwhile, Justin feels that he often forgets his memories. And before they parted, Mike, who could not stand the disease anymore, then said to Justin, like he was asking Justin to end their lives. The next day, Dr. Ben is coming home from church. There he was dismissed by the priest. The pastor asked Dr. Ben to meet a woman named Mutiso. She is a nurse from Kenya who is looking for a new home in America. Because Dr. Ben had a hard time as a new immigrant in America, so he finally helped Mutiso and allowed her to stay at his house for a while before she got a place to live. Even Dr. Ben also lent Mutiso money for her living expenses before she got a permanent job. One day, Mike checked his illness to a former football club doctor named Dr. Julian. There he looked very panicked. He asked Dr. Julian to immediately cure the headache that continued to torment him. But when Dr. Julian scanned Mike's brain, the scan showed that Mike's brain looked perfectly normal and there was no disease whatsoever. Heard that, Mike felt angry because how the pain in his head that was tormenting him every second was not detected by the doctor. Finally, every time Mike comes there, Dr. Julian only gave him painkillers. One night, Mike feels very frustrated with his illness. He always felt pain in his head. Until the end, he killed himself. Several days have passed. Mike's death left the whole town in shock. Because Mike is a legend in the city, Mike's body was handled by Dr. Cyril's laboratory. Then Dr. Ben, who will perform an autopsy on Mike's body. As usual, before he started the action, there he spoke first to Mike by saying, "Mike, help me find the cause of your death." And the surgery begins. After so many hours passed, Dr. Ben continues to examine all of Mike's organs. One of the doctors who is a fan of Mike, he was annoyed when he saw Dr. Ben slashing his idol's body. But Dr. Ben continued his research. After he finished, he felt strange. It turned out that there was no disease whatsoever suffered by Mike, though medical records show that Mike often complains of pain in his head. It made Dr. Ben feel confused and curious. Suddenly he seemed to hear a strange voice inside his head, like all those voices that always tormented Mike when he was alive. Dr. Ben decided to continue his research further. He promised himself and Mike's body that he would uncover the case of Mike's death to the end. Dr. Cyril knew about it. Then he reminded Dr. Ben that the work he was doing was very noble. Because if he succeeds with the autopsy, then he would clear Mike's name of all the bad news and rumors circulating right now. Dr. Cyril also said that Dr. Ben had to succeed. Because if he failed, then his doctor friend's reputation would also be destroyed. Considering Mike is a famous legend. After obtaining research permission from Dr. Cyril, finally he started his research.
Teammate, any teammate! Let's drive! Because the look of Hey Spencer.
A human brain.
Day after day passed. He made observations to the Pittsburgh Steelers club to observe and examine the lifestyle and the way they play football. He watched every recorded game. There he saw a lot of clashes between the heads of the football players. He tried to equate all the theories in his head with the facts he saw, because Dr. Ben's principle is that if he knows how they live, then he will know how they die. Finally, after successfully completing his research, he visited the university laboratory where he used to study. There he met Professor Stephen and his former college friends. He conveyed all the conclusions he had observed so far about Mike's brain condition. He then showed them a photo of the Cape Gennet bird. The bird is capable of producing a speed of 75 miles per hour. After that, Cape Gennet bird transformed itself into like a bullet before hitting the surface of the sea to dive. Second, woodpecker. The animal is capable of absorbing 1,000 grams force or gravitational vibrations. Woodpeckers peck trees 12,000 times per day or 85 million times during their lifetime. Likewise with other animals. They all have silencers in their bodies. Like when a woodpecker pecks a tree, then his tongue will extend back and encircle all parts of his brain. However, humans do not have a body anatomy that can protect their brains from hard impacts. Dr. Ben explains that humans will experience a concussion at 60 Gs, while the collision of the football players who collided with each other amounted to 100 Gs. Based on the calculations of Dr. Ben, as long as Mike played football from childhood until he retired from his professional career, he had endured more than 70,000 blows to his head. Without realizing it, the impact caused a small leak in Mike's brain, and causing Mike to have hallucinations, emotional chaos, strange voices popping in his head. Even that voice to the point of ordering him to commit suicide. Finally, Dr. Ben closed his conclusion with a sentence: God did not prepare man to play football. After listening to all the explanations from Dr. Ben, Professor Stephen, who was planning to lie, didn't know about the disease, because there isn't a single American who doesn't like football, including himself. But as a scientist, he felt he had to keep telling the truth even though it was bitter. Finally, they all agreed to publish the results of the research together in a journal. Some time later, not long after Dr. Ben's journal was published, Justin is a football legend as Mike Webster's teammate who was with the Pittsburgh Steelers. It seemed that he couldn't stand the pain in his head anymore. Too many strange sounds and bad commands he heard in his head, like committing violence against his wife and children. So he decided to leave the house. But while on the road, he crashed himself to death. On the other hand, Dr. Ben, who felt very happy because his name was written in a journal of research results about football. Then he asked Mutiso to go somewhere. There he then confesses his feelings to Mutiso and proposes to her. On the other hand, the director of the Pittsburgh Steelers club was furious after reading Dr. Ben's journal. He contacts all of the club's top brass to take immediate action to silence Dr. Ben, because his research would jeopardize their business. Dr. Ben receives terror every day, starting from the phone that always rings every second and strange sounds from outside his house. The terror didn't just come from the Pittsburgh Steelers who felt their business was being threatened, but they also come from almost all of Pittsburgh, where the people in that city really love the sport of football. One day Dr. Ben got a call from Dr. Julian. He was a doctor who had previously treated Mike's illness. There he invited Dr. Ben to come to his house because there was something he wanted to talk about. After Dr. Ben arrived, he immediately explained that it turned out that he and all the doctors associated with football had known about the brain damage long before Dr. Ben researched it. Yet they all chose to remain silent, because for them, the football business is killing the players. But on the one hand, it could also provide jobs and support tens of thousands of other people. But as a former doctor at the club, he felt he had a responsibility to save the football players. To him they were like family. He often checks and treats the players there. Dr. Julian said that he would fully support Dr. Ben's findings at any cost. He also said that now Dr. Ben's situation would not be easy, because now he was going up against the business giants who would try to silence him. Some time passed. Death after death of retired football legends continues. A total of 4 cases have been handled by the laboratory. Starting from Mike Webster, Terry Long, Andre Waters, and Justin Stolzike, they have the same condition. The brains on their bodies were badly damaged. With these 4 cases, the Pittsburgh Steelers couldn't deny them. With these 4 cases, so now their position is bigger than the giant Pittsburgh Steelers club, and now is the time to fight. The next day, Dr. Ben together with Dr. Julian met with Dr. Ron. He is president of the Congress of Neurologists at the Pittsburgh Steelers club. He conveyed everything to Dr. Ron, and asks for his help to work together to uncover the dark side of the football business. But Dr. Ron refused, even though he knew that fact. But revealing that fact is tantamount to killing the economy of tens of thousands and even millions of football-loving communities in the Pittsburgh Steelers. Dr. Ben kept pleading with Dr. Ron, because if the football players there are still playing without knowing the risks, then after retirement they will all die from their brain damage. He said it all for the sake of humanity. But when the day came for the press conference, Dr. Ben suffered defeat at the press conference. The club officials managed to prove that the 4 cases of brain damage occurred due to accidents while swimming, car accidents, and others. They managed to convince the media that the brain damage wasn't due to football. Not long after that defeat, the club continues to do various ways to silence Dr. Ben. starting from terrorizing his wife and arresting his superiors who were suspected of being involved in fraud. Because of the amount of pressure he got, finally Dr. Ben gave up and decided to move from the city to California. But at the same time he got the news that his wife had a miscarriage. Three years later, Dr. Ben is already living happily with his little family in California. He has had a cute child and his life has been very calm and peaceful. On the other hand, one of the field legends of the Pittsburgh Steelers club named Dave Durson felt that he could no longer endure the pain in his head and too many voices were popping up in his head. Finally Dave commits suicide. Shortly after, Dr. Julian again called Dr. Ben to convey the news. It was before Dave committed suicide. He wrote a will that said he believed in Dr. Ben's inventions, and he donated his brain for research. Now all the evidence is sufficient. The Pittsburgh Steelers finally decided to believe Dr. Ben's findings. They then invited Dr. Ben to officially tell all the truth about football. At the time Dr. Ben gave a speech. From a distance he saw the spirit of Mike who was smiling happy, because the cause of their death has been made clear. Now they can all rest in peace.